hidden in hundreds of pages of documentation you have to go through customs. They're hidden in back-end regulations that are hard to see. So a lot of times what's published about the true burden of these trade barriers looks a lot cleaner, it looks a lot lighter, but it hides what the under-the-water iceberg of it. Now, I will say one thing, though, to be fair. The Trump administration's numbers that they're using are still, because of all the murkiness we're talking about, the admin's assumptions about this. It's actually still very hard, and if you look through their methodology on it, even they are unsure of the actual true burden of all of these things in these countries. They're trying to put a sticker price on it, per se, but it's still hard to really be confident about exactly what the barriers are.
Okay, but aren't some of them more ironclad, like some of the tariffs that Canada imposes on things like milk, cheese, butter, chicken? Are those hard numbers, or are those also difficult to ascertain?
Well, to be honest, even those are hard to ascertain. So I'll give you a perfect example on this one. So Canada does impose, and it's actually a variable tariff rate, between about 250 and 300% on American dairy, but only after a certain amount of dairy is exported from the U.S. into Canada. The first tranche is at a 0% tariff rate. So if you think of it this way, if you're an American dairy exporter to Canada and you get in below the effective quota, it's 0%. But if you go over it, boom, 300%, 250%. So even there, right, it's how do you measure that exactly in one giant number? It's still a work of art as well as science.
Okay. What do you think this is going to do to the U.S. economy? Is this going to have a negative impact on our economy?
Well, again, like almost anything in politics, the goal here is to negotiate a win. So I think if you talk about everything that Trump has laid out and the people around him, I think it's clear that what they're looking at is saying, look, there's this whole host of issues across the globe that we need to resolve. That, as you had pointed out, no president for decades has really done the hard work of trying to address. So I think what Trump has done here and the team around him is put together a really well-engineered set of tools to go out to the world and say, look, get rid of your abuses, decouple from China, actually help us secure our borders, stop flooding fentanyl and terrorists into the United States. So if Trump can secure those victories, it'll be a tremendous positive for the American economy and, of course, for the American people.
Do you think it will work?
I think it certainly will, but it's going to be a little hard, a little bit of a mixed bag to see exactly with which country. So obviously Israel now famously got rid of all of its tariffs on the U.S. a day before the order. You have other countries that have already gone out in public and said, look, we've already called the White House. We're working on that. But then you've got countries like China, who today announced that they're going to put a 34% reciprocal tariff on the U.S., in addition to all the other abuses China's done. Now, to be fair, though, part of the goal here is to decouple from China. I cannot stress enough not just how much evil there is in the way the Chinese do things, but China is the world's worst abuser in all of human history, from currency manipulation and forced labor and all these other things. They have plundered the American economy more than any other country in human history.
Yeah. And isn't our trade deficit with China like well over $1 trillion, right?
It's not quite that high annually, but I mean...
No, not annually, but I mean aggregate. Overall, we owe them a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely. And I would tell you again, even that's a number we know of. I would say that the unknown number is probably even higher than that. It's hard to overestimate how much we've lost to them.
So will the prices, I guess the worry right now is that prices are going to spike here. We're going to see some inflation because the cost will be passed on to consumers. So are auto prices going to spike 25%? And are we going to go up all the percentage-wise that is being assessed on these products that are coming into the country?
So generally speaking, tariffs do pass through the consumers. However, this is only half the story. Trump is, of course, in the middle of negotiating a massive tax cut package with Congress. So if you think of it like this, even that tax cut package has a lot of tax increases paired with better tax cuts. In fact, it's kind of trillions of dollars on both sides of the equation there. but on net, it's a massive tax cut for the vast majority of Americans. So if we really use all the new tariff revenues to offset the deficits from massively cutting taxes on the American middle class and American businesses, it'll be a net positive. But again, part of that is he's got to win negotiations, not just across the globe, but with Congress to make sure that those revenues are used for those tax cuts that help the American public.
Why hasn't anyone taken action on this prior to now? Why did it take Trump in the year 2025 to finally try to do something about this?
Well, I think you could ask that question about everything the legacy media has done. You could ask that question about school choice, about the destruction of our cultural institutions and our values for decades. Mm-hmm. And I think we all know the answers to these, right? Which is that there's been this long march through our institutions of the left. And it's a left that doesn't believe in America as a philosophical grounding or as a place with borders and a people. It's a left that seeks the destruction of the U.S., of the West, of our Judeo-Christian values. And so I think when you look at it, you're looking at decades of politicians who came to D.C. and either furthered that leftist goal or were simply passive to it, didn't have the courage to fight it, and were satisfied to just at a lower level plunder the American worker and taxpayer to fund their donors. And tragically, it's been decades of both of those things going on, depending on which party was in power.
Talking to Richard Stern from the Heritage Foundation. Richard, so do you think will the stock market recover from this quickly? Are we going to get back to normal here after the initial shock of all this?
Well, so the stock market, I think, will almost certainly recover. And to your question about the timeline, what I would say is it depends on the timeline of the negotiations abroad. If a week from now, dozens of countries have removed their trade barriers on the U.S., and Trump has gotten the victories that we need for the American public, you're going to see the stock market roar back as it never has before. But if this takes months or longer, or if Congress doesn't want to pass a tax cut bill or any number of other things, then it might take a lot longer for the market to recover. But again, I think that just speaks to how critical it is, frankly, that Congress work with the president to cut regulations, to cut wasteful government spending.
And they're on it. They are on it. They are working, man, night and day.